Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our next unit in Big Ideas. We are jumping to lesson 6.1, chapter 6 in the book for our next unit, page 244 on functions, because this is a great chapter, a great unit, leading us into graphing functions, which is really, really important in pre-algebra as we move to algebra next year. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take our functions today, apply what we learned, and we're going to use ordered pairs and mapping diagrams to display functions. Our essential question: how can you use a mapping diagram to show the relationship between two data sets? Ladies and gentlemen, I know, being a person of character and intelligence, you do exactly what you're asked to do before you watch these video notes. You went to the top of page 244. You wrote down some notes on relations and mapping diagrams, and that is fantastic. We're going to go over that in just a second. I want to remind you, however, to take your notes correctly using these videos. It's very important to look and listen first. Watch what I'm doing, listen to what I'm saying, and then before we move on to the next slide, we will pause the video, and then you'll pick up your pen, your pencil, your marker, whatever you're using to take your wonderful notes with excellence. You'll write it down, and then you'll begin again and go watch the next slide of the video. So important to look and listen first. So, ladies and gentlemen, you took some notes on relations and mapping diagrams, and the first thing you started with was our ordered pairs, our inputs and our outputs. It's very important to understand those. I understand you know inputs and outputs. I know you know X and Y's. We're just going to spend a few seconds on it. Ordered pairs can be used to show our inputs and outputs. Now let's talk about it. It has a picture, inputs, and it's going here. Well, what part of our ordered pair is the input? That's right, it is the X. And it's also very important to understand our input, our X number of our ordered pair is the independent. It's the independent variable. The independent variable is our input, is our X. Very important to know that. Independent variable. And then our outputs are Y. And they are our dependent variable. So outputs are dependent. We don't know what our output is until we have something to put in it. So our independent variable is the input and our dependent variable is the output. Ladies and gentlemen, you're looking, you're listening. And then we move on to taking a relation. A relation pairs inputs with outputs. It just makes a pair. You can list it two ways. One, you can use our ordered pairs, or two, something new called a mapping diagram, in which we say here's our inputs, here's our outputs, and we draw arrows to those numbers. All right, we're going to learn today how to go back and forth between them. So, ladies and gentlemen, first thing we're going to do is take a mapping diagram and we're going to list our ordered pairs, all right, from the mapping diagram. So, here we have our inputs. Our inputs are X and our outputs are Y, right? X and Y. So all I have to do is follow. Here I have an input of 2 and the arrow takes me over to 1 as my output. That's one of the ordered pairs from the mapping diagram. I'm sure this is pretty straightforward stuff. The next ordered pair is 4 and 2. The next one is 6 and 3. And the last one is 8 and 4. And of course, I know we're not doing it right here, but you would be expected to be able to say, hey, here's my X and Y ordered pairs. I then need to create a mapping diagram from that. Okay? And I'm sure that it makes a little bit of sense that you could go backwards. So go ahead and pick up your pencil, write that down. Here we go. Our next example, listing the ordered pairs shown in the mapping diagram. So again, we have a relationship that pairs some inputs with some outputs. And so our first ordered pair, following the arrow with 1, is 4. And then our next one, going from 2, now there's 2 arrows coming from 2, so we're going to list them both. The first one it pairs with 0, and the second one it pairs with -5. And then our last ordered pair from this mapping diagram is 3 and -6. Ladies and gentlemen, pretty straightforward stuff. Go ahead and write that down. Join me on the next slide. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about a special type of relation. a special type of relation that pairs exactly one output with each, exactly one output with each input. So each input has exactly one output, and we call that special relationship a function. We call it a function. If it has an input, that input can only have one output to be called a function. So let's talk about that right here. In taking this and determining whether this function of ordered pairs in a mapping diagram can be considered a function. In other words, it has exactly one output for each input. All right, so we start to list our ordered pairs, and we recognize that we have 0 and 2. All right, so 0 has exactly one output, and that is 2. Then we go to our next ordered pair, 1, and it's paired up with 4. Again, 1 has exactly one output, and that is 4. And then we go to 2. Well, 2 has 2 arrows. 2 has an output of 6 and an output of 7. This input 2 has more than one output, which means it does not have exactly one. So is this mapping diagram a relation that is called a function? This is not a function. It is not a function because we have an input of 2 which has more than one output. It has an output of 6 and an output of 7. Doesn't work. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go to this next one. This input and output. And side to side is this relation, what we can call a function. All right, so we have our first ordered pair. -2 is paired with 2. All right, got to follow that arrow. We have -1 that's paired with 1. We have 0 that's paired with 0. We have 1 that's paired with 1. And we have 2, which is paired with 2. Okay, so some of you might think that this is not a function. However, there is only one arrow coming from each input. It doesn't matter if we have multiple inputs that have the same output. That's okay. Each input has exactly one output. So this is a function. It is a function. All righty, go ahead and copy that down and join us on our quick writes. So our quick writes today, ladies and gentlemen, I gave you a handout. Go ahead and take the ordered pairs from the mapping diagram and list them. And then on part B, determine whether this relation mapping diagram shows a function or not. Does each input have exactly one output? And ladies and gentlemen, when you are finished with that, go ahead and take a quick break and come back and join me for our second and last video of the night.